Hello and welcome to the first Let's Start a Cult podcast. I'm Kevin Feasy and I'm here with...
My name's Matt. I'm a guitarist.
Matt Stevens, and together we make one half of the popular beat combo, The Fierce and the Dead.
Hello.
You may have heard of us, or you may not have heard of us. Who knows? But anyway, we've decided to pass the time by recording a few conversations, maybe even in the future talking to some of our friends out there who you may find interesting. Let's hope so. But today, we decided to just have a little chat about what we're up to at the minute. And also, we've been together now for 10 years as a band.
10 glorious years, yes.
10 glorious years, yes, exactly. So we wanted to talk today a little bit. We've had some people in the past asking us about our first release that we made, which was... I don't know if is bold statement the right idea or just an accident.
We didn't mean to record it, so it's hard to say it was a statement. We
meant to record it. We just didn't realise we were going to release the whole thing.
It's a bit. It wasn't something particularly planned, but it was something we recorded. Basically, I met Kev about in the early 90s. Was it?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
in the 90s. I think
it might have actually been 1990.
1990, so about 30 years ago. But when we were at school, and we've been messing about with bands for years and trying to do stuff and keep it going and just build it up and all that. But eventually we moved to London from Rushden, the homeland, and then we ended up starting a band that was in London, and eventually that split up. And
we moved to London because the streets of paved with gold. I seem to remember.
I hear that's true. Yes,
and it turned out it was just full of indie bands at the time.
So in the Libertines. In the Darkness, wasn't it, when we got to London?
It was,
and the Libertines and all those sort of bands. And no one wanted to hear my weird chords or my Jason Faulkner Jellyfish tribute stuff that I was doing. I was interested at the time, funnily enough. And so when we got to London, people weren't that into what we were doing, particularly. We're just messing about, really, and having fun and learning about playing in bands and stuff, And eventually what happened was... that band split up, and Kev started a recording studio.
I did,
which was Pinner, which is where we ended up recording this. So at the time, I was doing open mics with an acoustic guitar, and doing various gigs, opening for sort of prog rock bands, or doing. I think I was doing prog rock bands at that point.
Well, you could actually go back. You could go back a little further there, man. Basically, we all kind of went off and did our own little things and whatever. And you, Matt. People probably won't even really remember a lot of what it was like, but you started doing your solo kind of stuff, like acoustic. You got a loop pedal and started putting your stuff together. And it happened to be the time when MySpace was all kicking off. Remember MySpace?
So what happened? Yeah, so I was posting music on MySpace. And I started getting gigs from so I'd be doing things like doing folk festivals and open mics, and I'd go and open for people like sort of John Gomm, before John Gomm was famous, and I think I was opening for prog rock bands, and
they seem to be the one that kind of like community, because at that time, I mean, like things like Prog Magazine and all that didn't exist, did they?
No.
So at that time, it was kind of
just before that. Prog Magazine came about in 2009, I think. So about 2008, I released an acoustic album, and I was doing open mic gigs, and I did like Spratton Folk Festival, and I was doing sort of festivals and stuff. And then I got gigs opening for prog rock bands, and I, those sort of weird things. And then eventually, as I was recording the second solo album I did, I'd sort of come across Prog Magazine, and the prog community had sort of adopted me because I was interested in. I'd always talked about sort of Robert Fripp and things like that, and because I was always interested in like I was really into like Jason Faulkner and Bob Mould and that sort of thing, but I was also into the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Robert Fripp.
Well, so, I mean, let's. I mean, a lot of your
commercial
solos.
Yeah. There was too many Bob Mould, Mahavishnu fans looking for new music at the time, really. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, well, that's what it was all about back then. Wasn't it? But
I don't think it was that niche was really available to me. So, but yeah, I was building up online, and then that I know I'd made a solo album, which did kind of okay and got a bit of attention, and there was definitely a little bit of a. You know, after playing in bands for years and no one caring about anything I did at all, to have some sort of attention and get some sort of little reviews and bits on MySpace and building up a sort of following on MySpace, it was really nice to actually have some, because for years, you remember, Kev, we were like, it was like calling into the void, wasn't it? It was we had no idea if anyone liked what we did. It was really weird.
Yeah, it was very, very strange times. There was literally no way in. I mean, let's be fair, we weren't exactly a world class band or anything like that. But there was just no way in unless
gatekeepers were so
I mean. Admittedly, we could have been a lot better, but I think a lot of it was about going out and hanging around with the right people.
Well, what we never realised that you had to be part of a scene and you had to be doing stuff that was relevant to that scene. So, like I say, when we got to London, it was all sort of Oceansides were about, weren't they? Oceansides.
Yeah, I think. See, this is it. I think just. There was a little sort of tail end of kind of, I guess, really people who'd sort of, our age, who'd kind of grown up with a lot of the American alt.
Yeah, so like
all that. Yeah. So bands like the tail end of hardcore going into.
At the
drive-in, but there was, people who were like, influenced by things like Fugazi, and then also mixing that with English influences like Cardiacs and things like that, So I think that's where you get bands like Oceansides from,
Yeah, because the Oceansides were about, weren't they? And then you had the Libertines, and then Biffy Clyro and those sort of bands, and there was.
We supported Biffy Clyro, didn't we? We supported Biffy Clyro in Northampton on the tour for their first ever single.
So we were kind of concurrent to those sort of bands, weren't we? And then, but we weren't good enough, basically. And compared to a lot of those sort of guys, because at the end of the day, the reason Biffy Clyro and Oceansides did really well is because they're really good and they toured really hard and they looked the part and they were really good bands. And Amplifier were about, but I didn't know Amplifier. Did you know Amplifier at the time?
I seem to remember maybe reading a few little bits. Well, that was another thing as well. I mean, a lot of it was just sort of the print press was still king, really. So
yeah, unless you were in like one of those. Yeah, I mean, it was very hard to imagine a world where we weren't constantly online all the time. But at the time, it was sort of like there was, unless you were in like the print press or there was like Drowned in Sound. That was a big website at the time, and MySpace came in, but like Amplifier. Because I remember being shocked when I found out Porcupine Tree was still going, and they were playing big shows.
Yes,
and I was like, because I saw them playing in pubs in the 90s with our mates band supporting the guys who are now Orange Clocks, who are good friends of ours, the Mighty Orange Clocks, who I highly recommend. But like we didn't know that. Those sort of bands were still going. So like and there was like the Pineapple Thief and people like that who were, sort of those prog sort of bands. We had no idea they even existed.
There was a lot of
literally didn't know there was a prog scene, and we never felt we were. It wasn't like we were anti like being part of that a prog scene, but the post rock thing as well. And there's lots of stuff going on, but it wasn't. We never felt really part of any of it because. Whilst we liked a lot of different sorts of styles of music, we always lived our own little world, especially coming from Rushden, because where we grew up there was like punk bands and psychedelic bands and metal bands and space rocky sort of bands and sort of power pop sort of bands, but everyone sort of worked together and was all part of one scene. But
that's right.
We didn't really realise, did we?
I think that's an important thing to remember as well, is that like a lot of the provincial scenes back then there was no like separation because there was very few places to play, or decent sort of places to play, and B as well, it's just like everybody was just doing the same thing. So it didn't matter if you was a ska band or a hip hop band, you'd end up on the same bill.
Because there was only one venue.
Yeah, exactly. And then us moving down to London, we basically with a piece of straw in our teeth and pitchforks, leading Daisy the cow down the M1, and sort of like we didn't kind of understand that London at that time, especially with like things like the NME and stuff like that, was very segregated in a way. I'm sure lots of people out there will tell us we're wrong, but we just had no clue at all. So we basically thought, let's just do something else then. So I went off and started learning a bit more about audio engineering and recording and all this kind of stuff, and ended up running a studio down in Old Street. And Matt basically just started putting your stuff up on MySpace.
I worked in a record shop, and I'd put put stuff on the. I basically record stuff with my loop pedal and stuff, and then put it on the internet, and then. And eventually, it sort of gained a little following on the internet, and I'd give away all my music away free. And eventually, it started to do all right. And by the time the sort of second solo album came out, there was a little sort of following for it. Not a lot of people, but enough to make it worth doing. I would have done it anyway because I was doing it because I enjoyed doing it. But and then, so basically, we were making this other album I was doing, which was this instrumental acoustic stuff. And what I wanted to try and do was have some electric tracks between the acoustic songs to sort of make something new and more interesting. And so basically, I said we got Kev and Stuart as the rhythm section.
Stuart's our current drummer. Stuart, just to clarify as well, the Fierce and the Dead, all four of us actually grew up together back in Northamptonshire. And we're in various bands with each other over the years, and through our own circuitous routes, we all ended up in London, and ended up starting the band again, starting this band 10 years ago. So so Stuart, that's Stuart Marshall, the current drummer in the Fierce and Dead. That was the first time we'd actually played together for quite a few years, wasn't it?
Yeah, because we were in a band with him and Roshi in the 90s, and then he went to Prague, didn't he?
He went and lived in a cupboard in Prague. That's correct.
He took his tent.
I'm not even lying.
Did he leave his tent
here?
No,
he didn't. No, we stole his tent.
And he's never forgiven for it because I left it at Glastonbury.
We didn't.
Stu, I'm sorry about your tent, mate. I'm really sorry.
But yeah, he decided
that's really bad for the environment. Actually, it's quite a poor decision of mine, actually. But they were the 90s, weren't they? So as people were drinking
different times.
Different times. Yeah, different times. Anyway. The more important thing is, so at the time we were trying to get this band together, and we played in bands for years, and we'd end up at this point of trying to record these tracks. And I don't think, did I have a chord sequence, Kevin? That was it.
Yeah, that's basically it. And I can't remember how we came to the decision, but we decided what would be fun. I think maybe it might have even purely been because we were too lazy to learn anything. That it was just a case of like we were just going to jam. I tell you what it was. I was at that time. So to explain, the studio I ran, Pinner, was actually inside a studio complex, and the main studio downstairs was Fortress Studios. And I'm sure many of you may have heard of the legendary Fortress Studios over the years. It was in King's Cross, and then it moved to...
It was quite famous, wasn't it?
Commercial Road. Yeah, well, in the 90s, it was very much a place where you'd have Primal Scream and Kate Moss and all that kind of set would sort of like, sort of randomly turn up. By the time you got there, it wasn't cool anymore. No, well, it was kind of... Yeah. It was still all right, but it was also one of the places where all the roadies used to hang out as well. So you'd hear some great stories there. Anyway, there was I digress. There was a bar upstairs, and we sort of like had our studio at the back there with this really cool, bizarrely good sounding live room. It was a box. It was myself and a chap called Sonny that ran the studio. And for some reason, the room just sounded really good. So we used to do quite a lot of live recordings in there. It wasn't a massive room, but we had this kind of ethos of just managing spill between instruments and things. So you could actually hear it on quite a few albums. The band Polar Bear, who highly recommend. There's an album called Peepers, was recorded in that studio, and you can hear a lot of the room there. And obviously, as well, you can also hear it on the track we're talking about, Part 1. That's all the room sound in there. And I do think that we decided to do it live like that because it was just a case of, well, we've just got this chord sequence. Let's just start playing and see what happens. And it was something that we were quite used to, really, because we used to do that quite a lot. So the idea of just turning up somewhere and just playing and seeing what happens, I think was fine, wasn't it? But the Fortress Studios, recently, they'd had a session there with the band Faust. And I remember talking to the engineer, and he was saying about how they'd recorded. I must admit, I don't know which incarnation of Faust it was, because I think it was like Bucks Fizz at that point, wasn't it?
Was it the Faust with the concrete mixer or without the concrete?
It was the Faust with the concrete mixer. Yeah, they had oil drums and grinders and all sorts going on. But they, he told me how they recorded was basically they just recorded like continuously for like an hour, and then everything would be edited together after that.
That's
in
like
chunks.
Used to make records. So that's
exactly. So
crank method, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that may have. I might have misremembered this, but I think that may have been one of the main influences for just like, well, let's just do it and see what happens, and then we'll edit it all together. And I think we're discussing. I think we were genuinely thinking it was going to be sort of like a 3 or 4 minute kind of improvisation, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we literally just set up in the room with yourself, Matt. I believe I was DIing you, and you got your Fender Telecaster. You was really into clean sounds then, weren't you?
It was during the time when I basically I used to play in metal bands and used to play in distorted indie rock sort of bands as well. I got so annoyed with the sound of distorted guitars because I just got bored of it, that I just used to play clean all the time. And because I was playing acoustic, my I could actually play those. I could play like that because I was so used to not having fuzz on at all. So,
that's right, yeah.
And I got really into sort of playing melodies and solos based around the chord changes. I went through a stage of playing a lot of jazz and stuff, and I learned all the Django Reinhardt stuff, and I learned loads of Joe Pass and all the chord substitutes sort of things. I wasn't that great at it, but I learned how to do it, and I was using a lot of those sort of techniques rather than sort of conventional sort of rocky sort of soloing.
Yeah,
it's more these sort of it's more the chord melody style soloing on it. So the playing on this one, it was all done with the DL4 delay on all the time. And I think I just had that original chord sequence, didn't I? Which is the one that's...
God bless the DL4. For those who don't know, Lion Sex DL4 is a magic pedal that shouldn't sound as good as it does, but we keep trying to get rid of them, and we keep trying different pedals, and they don't sound as good as it for some reason.
I've got stuck with it.
Yeah, it kind of it overloads in a very satisfying way, doesn't it? I don't know what it is, but it became very much part of your sound.
There's a way it layers, and basically people say now that it doesn't recreate the sound. It's supposed to create sort of tape echo, or like the way we put loops down when they layer onto each other. Yeah. And it's supposed to create this sound. Like the one that the Fripp and Eno stuff. That on tape sound, and it does it really well. But there's something about the way it layers and compresses that I really like.
Yes, because a lot of people say it's not actually a loop pedal, is it?
No,
because if you layer loops on top of it, so what happens is if you play into it and you loop that, and then you layer another loop, the initial loop gradually fades out. So over a course of a period of time, if you just keep playing over the same loop, you could actually completely play something different. It's a very strange but subtle kind of thing. Exactly like you say, it's more like Frippatronics or something, isn't it?
And as you put the loops down, the old loops go into the background. They slowly fade away in a really interesting way. So
yeah,
that's one of the reasons I got stuck with the blooming thing. And to be honest, I've gone through so many of them. And my original one broke years ago, and I'd love to. Some amazing new delay pedals that I'm really into getting. I'd love to try, but because the nature of what the Fierce and the Dead do, sometimes we have to do flying gigs, or we have to do we're not a touring band. We're a band that do, probably do 6 to 10 shows a year. It's very useful to try and keep the same smallish pedal board, and to start having multiple delay pedals on there take lots of space. So it's probably a really unwise idea. So I've got stuck with this one delay, and I love it. It's a great, and I've got it so into it that I can get any sound that I really need out of it. But I'd love to try like the Strymons or any of the new ones, or things that do interesting stuff, because I've had that one piece of equipment for so long, but unfortunately it's become so part of our sound. These things. And
hey, at the end of the day, what works.
Oh yeah, totally, man. Yeah, totally.
So anyway, we digress. So there you go, Fender Telecaster, straight into. I think it was literally just the Line 6. I think you did have a distortion pedal, although I've got no idea what it was.
It probably the Marshall Shredmaster, the reissue Shredmaster.
Oh, the Jackhammer.
The Jackhammer, Marshall Jackhammer,
yeah.
Most I think there's a distorted guitar part in it, isn't there?
There is, yeah. When it all kind of kicks off at one point.
When it goes a bit mogwai in the middle, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then straight into it was a little Fender. It was a.
What's my friend Princeton, wasn't it?
Yeah, solid state Fender.
I've still got that. The speakers broke on it. I meant to fix it, but I've never got around to it.
But it's it was a great little sound, that. So anyway, it was just that with a mic, shoved on it, and a DI. I was playing a precision bass that I borrowed for our friend Dan, who's unfortunately no longer with us, but he had lent us. We used to play in bands with him as well. He was a great bass player. And and he'd lent us. I think it was a 70s precision bass, going into a really nondescript Torque amp, I believe it was. There was lying around that just kind of accrued in the studio, and again DI'd that. And then Stuart was playing the house kit. We were like Motown. We had a house kit that we sort of kind of left set up most of the time.
Did that belong to you?
It was.
Didn't it was a drum kit?
It did. Yeah, we brought it. Yeah, it was a Pearl. I think it was a Pearl Export or something. Nothing fancy. We took like the front head off the kick and everything and deadened it down. Yeah, we just made it all really simple, super simple. Stuart had this snare drum that Stuart will tell you what it was, but it sounded absolutely awful in the room. It sounded like somebody hitting a biscuit tin. But for some reason, through a mic, it sounded great. Right. We don't know why, but in the room it sounded absolutely awful. But for some reason, recording, it just seemed to have much more body, and it was almost like self-distorting or something. I don't know. It just sounded quite crunchy just on its own without doing much to it, really. So yeah, that was it. That was a setup, and then I don't think there was no rehearsals. There was nothing. I think we just kind of like had an idea of a couple of bits or something, but the idea was to just keep going, wasn't it? And to be honest, we played with each other, figuratively speaking, for so many years that the push and pull of it, and let's face it, we weren't playing, we're not Miles Davis, we weren't playing jazz, but we could all feel like when we're heading towards a crescendo or
I just
something like
remembered. The last time we played before this, actually, together, was 2 years before this. Was a Monster Magnet tribute band we had.
That was.
We did 2 gigs.
Which is actually, so that would have been, so that would have been 2008. And so, the story behind that was a very close friend of ours passed away. And he was a massive Monster Magnet fan. And as a kind of tribute to him, we put together a little band, and that was actually the first time Fierce and the Dead had all played together on the same stage. So it was me on bass, Stuart on drums, Steve and Matt on guitars. So Fierce and the Dead didn't exist at this point, and we had our friend Paul, who some of you may have heard of, who does a lot of artwork for us. We're very lucky. We have Mark Buckingham, the amazing comic book artist, doing art, and we also have our friend Paul, who does a lot of our sticker designs and T-shirt design and stuff. And Paul's doing vocals. And yeah, you're absolutely right. That was the last time we kind of the last time before this, and also the first time that we all played on the stage together. So yeah, well remembered. That was great.
I only just remembered, but yeah, I mean, it was was 2 years before, wasn't it? So so that drum kit did sound really good, didn't it? It was.
It did sound great. Yeah, I mean, we over the years in the studio, we just sort of really stripped it down. Nothing fancy. Just made it really simple.
I'm just reading. Kev at the time wrote some notes, which I've got here.
Did I?
And apparently, Stu used his own snare.
Yeah, that's the one I was saying about the biscuit tin snare.
Oh,
yeah.
That's
the one that sounded horrible in the room, but for some reason sounded great through the microphones. Who knows? Don't question these things. We weren't going to test it. We might have destroyed the mojo.
Because we recorded it without headphones, didn't we?
Yeah. Just literally, just in the room, just as if we was at rehearsal.
I've got no memory of it at all, to be honest. I don't even know why I'm on the podcast because I don't even. It was like I can see a photo. I vaguely remember being there on the day, but apart from that, and I remember having that chord seat, but I've got no memory of it apart from that, to be honest.
Right, sure.
Because then we had the jam and we recorded the jam, and I remember being really pleased with some of the rhythmic stop. You remember it goes on that do that bit. I remember that being really good. And then you took it away and then put a keyboard part in, didn't you?
Well, and the DJ Shadow part. Because basically
it wasn't me on keyboards; it's you on keyboards.
Yeah, I added that stuff in the middle. Yeah, so basically, I remember talking to Matt at the time on the phone, and I started mixing it. And I mean, there's no editing on it at all because because you couldn't. Because I mean, you can actually hear on some of Matt's guitar parts, you can hear the spill from the drums coming through the pickups. And obviously, Matt was using quite a lot of delay, so there's this quite nice sort of like crunchy delay going on in the drums as well, which is actually Matt's pickups because you were literally standing about 3 feet away from Stuart, weren't you? It's a very small room. So
that, Mexican Telecaster, with the and the front speaker was really microphonic, wasn't it? I haven't got that in there anymore, but it was broken even then, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it was. But I remember mixing it. And I remember going through it, and obviously the bass and the drums are very simple. They sort of go up and down, but everything seemed to sort of work in a. It seemed to be, without sounding too pretentious about it. There was like this narrative going through it, and the lines that Matt was playing, I could never find a point where I felt I could like chop or edit without it disrupting that flow, Right. So I mean, again, I don't want to sound pretentious, but if you imagine like somebody's conversation, it's like if you suddenly like cut a paragraph out of it, it would be a very different thing. So, and what you were playing, I think maybe it's a psychological thing. I think because we were just like let's go, you really laid back. The build-ups and stuff. We took a long time to get to them. There was no rush at all, was there?
I listened to it this morning, and I'm genuinely really happy with some of the playing on it. I haven't played like that before or since. To be honest, I don't really know where a lot of that came from because it's got this sort of Blue Hotel sort of delay 50s rock and roll thing going to it. Sort of jazzy chords, and I don't know where that came from, and I haven't played like that since or before that, to be honest. So listen to what I do now; it's nothing like that. So don't know what that was all about. Don't know.
And then I don't know why, but there's the beginning section, which is the band live, and then there's the end section, there's the band live, and I think maybe there was a section in the middle where it probably all went terribly wrong. But by this point, we was already sort of like a good, 8 or 9 minutes into the track. I honestly cannot remember, but I just had this idea of fading into these kind of like synths. So a lot of people have said about that middle section is guitars, but it's not. It's synths. It's heavily distorted synthesizers. Which I do know where I got the influence of that from. That was I'd recently been to see a band called Fuck Buttons. Excuse my French, but and I remember going to see them, and they did this thing where it's just like a wall of sound of synthesizers, really heavily distorted synthesizers. And I remember it wasn't abrasive at all. It was actually like getting into a very nice warm bath. It was there were so many harmonics created by this distortion that it just felt really nice. So the one thing, I think there's maybe 3 or 4 monophonic lines going on that as it builds up. But as some of the notes cross over with the distortion, new notes are created. So it actually sounds like there's more lines going on there than there actually is, because the overtones and are hitting each other and just creating, psychologically you're hearing other notes, which I found really interesting. And then the drums is literally just Stuart's drums. Might have even been for another session he did for us for another artist.
Oh, yeah, I seem to remember that.
Yeah. And I just he recorded a load of like bits and bobs. I can't remember now.
Yeah,
but I seem to remember
that.
Yeah, just getting these drums and just I mean, we're massive fans of DJ Shadow.
DJ Shadow brought to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, we usually say the first album especially, and even these days, maybe less so these days, but DJ Shadow is a massive influence. That album, Introducing, is a massive influence on us. The idea of having this kind of rhythmically led music, that was a big thing for the first album, to not have sort of like guitar solos and all this kind of stuff, but to just be creating these kind of soundscapes. So anyway, yeah, I took those drums and I'd done a session with a guy a little while before that, and he'd been doing a lot of dancey stuff. He was a really great producer, and he'd actually taught me quite a lot of techniques of like cutting up drums and playing things backwards and flipping them around, and a complete disregard for the performance, which I loved. I thought that was great actually, because it created something new. And in that section there, I was like, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. And so that ended up with that section there, and then it just sort of magically worked into the end section. So the beginning. I don't really remember, to be honest. Yeah, I don't remember what was in the middle. I do remember that the beginning and the end are not 2 separate takes. We only ever did one recording.
Really?
Yeah, that's all one recording. I know. 10 years.
I feel like I'm interviewing you about something I wasn't there for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because I have literally no memory. So. Yeah,
exactly. And I can barely remember this. So yeah, and it just seemed to just sort of really worked, and just sort of like came out of it like that. And then so there it was. We did it. We were quite happy with it, and I think myself and yourself, Matt, we kind of went, "Oh, yeah, this is something different." And I think then we kind of decided to maybe. Well, it was never even an idea of putting a band together, was there, Matt? It was just kind of like, well, let's just call it something and put it out.
Yeah, stick it on the internet and see what happens. Basically, was the idea of it. And so what we did, we put it on Bandcamp, so pay what you want download, and we created a MySpace, and because that dates us, doesn't it? We put it on our 8-track, and released VHS. We put it on our MySpace, and we put it on our Twitter account, and people really liked it more than anything we'd done before, which was quite weird.
We were quite surprised.
It's like, so what's the moral of the story is, if you want to do something that people like, don't even try. Don't bother.
Yes.
Don't just mess about with your mates. Stick it on the internet and see if people like it. So that's the moral of the story. You've and overall, I probably learned nothing. Learned nothing at all about appealing to people. Just literally, if you like it and you like doing it, stick it on the internet and see if anyone likes it, and they will. So
that was basically it, isn't it? Well, I mean, we were very lucky that
if we tried to say that people like it, they wouldn't be into it, would they? So
yeah.
But I remember getting like messages from people saying, "Oh, this is like my new favourite band and stuff," and it was like, oh, well, we perhaps would have put some vocals on it and finished it then. Perhaps if you were. I'd
have made more effort.
I would have made more effort, to perhaps have a second chord sequence and things like that. But it just shows you that sometimes when you just do things for the fun of them, and I remember people saying, "Oh, you might sound," and I remember it was around this time people started comparing it to like Godspeed You Black Emperor and stuff, and I quite like that sort of thing. I quite like Tortoise but I don't really know those bands that well. My I wasn't really, I was into Miles Davis a lot of the time, and the Mad Vishnu and King Crimson, that sort of thing. And like I say, you were into sort of like you were into like the synthy stuff, weren't you? And sort of jazz and things. So it was kind of jazz rock stuff, and then it got reviewed in Prog magazine, didn't it? And then we were a prog band.
Yeah, and also
how did that happen? And
wait
a minute, I thought, Robert Fripp's a big deal for me, but I didn't realise we were a prog band.
Well, to be honest, releasing a 19-minute track, we were asking for it, really.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And Dom Lawson, who's since become a good friend of ours, reviewed it in Prog magazine and gave it a really good review. And he said it was Dom. Dom's a legend, yeah. And like Dom's like a proper really respected within the metal scene, and since I've got to know him, the guy really knows his stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, like we've got to know him since, but it wasn't like
it wasn't like mate, did it? No, definitely. It was
somebody, a journalist, a professional journalist that we had no connection
about our song, which was even more mind blowing at the time, because like I say, it was those sort of things didn't happen to people from Royston. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
This is before you could really, there was no Bad Elephant, there was no record companies that would put out stuff like that. I mean, there was, in terms of funny music bands, you'd had the Cardiac stuff in in Porcupine Tree and people like that, but we didn't even know that existed really at the time.
No.
We knew there was some Ocean Size and Biffy Clyro and people like that, but I didn't really know about Cardiacs. I knew about Mr. Bungle, but I didn't really know about Cardiacs. And then there was people like Porcupine Tree, and we were into the post rock stuff. We were into like Bobby Conn, and what else were we into at the time? And like Jellyfish and Bob Mould, and lots of stuff. So when Prog magazine picked up on it, we kind of realised that there was this sort of prog scene, and we were so pleased because, and then we were doing, and when going forward in the story a bit too far, but when we started doing gigs, we realised there was an audience for it, and we realised we really liked the people who came to the gigs. They were just really nice people. They weren't the sort of pretentious libertine sort of crowd. It was this other people who are just genuinely into music. It was a real sort of culty sort of thing, and that was really cool as well. But so anyway, we got it out. We put it on the internet, and people were really into it. And we started.
And there was no physical product. It's never been released on physical product, has it?
We'll have to sort that out, haven't we? We'll have to get it on vinyl, or we've been talking about it for years. We never got around to it. But
we've been talking about it for 10 years.
Literally been talking about it for 10 years. But always something new comes along, and when I get excited about something new, I forget about the last thing I was done.
Yeah.
But no, it's only really been, I listened to it a couple of times in the last few years. I've listened to it a couple of times recently and been really surprised how much I like it. I'd really like to perform it live at some point if we get around to it. But
funny enough, Steve, the other guitarist in the band, Steve, he's not on it because it was just me, Matt, and Stuart playing on it. But Steve joined very quickly afterwards when it sort of turned into more of a thing. But Steve is actually the only person who remembers how it all goes.
Yeah. I would literally have to learn it like a cover version because I have no idea how to play it.
Yeah. Well, one of the issues with the bass, one of the issues with the bass line is that the bass line is like super simple to the whole thing. So it's not a case of remembering how it goes. I could, it's absolutely easy, but it's more a case of if we were to try and reproduce it, when does things happen? Because when we were there recording it, it was literally just bit of eye contact and a nod, and something else would happen. So I'm not going to sit there counting.
A complex system of nods is what you're going to have to adopt there, Kev. You're going to need some signs, and you're going to need some sort of orchestrated nods for me and Stu. I think that's the only way we're going to get through it. Yeah, but I'd really like to do it live. I'd like to do that whole thing, all the parts as one gig. I'd like to do that as a one-off show one day. But it's
it's a lot of hard work, isn't it?
The trouble with the Face of the Dead is it's a thing that we're all spread out. We all got a lot of very complex lives, and we can only do so much with it. And I was watching a video interview with a guy from Wolfpack, and he said they've only got so many darts, and they have to be careful how they throw them. And I thought that was a really fantastic. Yeah, that's really good. And that's how it is with the Face of the Dead. We've only got so many darts. At the moment, because of what's happening, obviously with in the news and that at the moment. We're going to focus on writing a record.
Just for people in the future, we are currently recording this in March 2020. Me and Matt are both based in London. Matt's at his house. I'm at his house. I'm at my house. And
you're at my house.
I'm not.
You're in the garden again.
I'm in the garden again. I'm at my house.
Joe Pasquale joke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it, yeah. I'm at my house. Matt's at his house. We're doing this over Skype. Other voice recording softwares are available. But that's it's all a bit weird out there at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah. So what the plan is to make a podcast and give us something to do while we record a new record as well. We're in the process of making our fourth album at the moment, so and we'll probably put out some singles and stuff. But at the moment, we're just looking back on some of the stuff we've done and taking a few minutes. Sort of look back and enjoy the rememberings, as they say.
Enjoy the remembrance. Just trying to get it down in some kind of document before our
minds completely go. Yeah, because just to be honest, if you hadn't been here, I would have been talking about. I remember the chords. I think one of them's E minor. I would have been E minor. I've heard it. I don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember being there, and it's all gone. It's all just gone.
It's all gone.
It's been busy years. The last 10 years have been very busy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But I have to say, we're talking about lessons and things like that. The one thing that I kind of like realised, and I think even at the time we didn't realise it, and I would give this as advice to other people. Musicians, most musicians
don't follow us, for goodness
sake. I've got to say, don't follow us. But most musicians worth their salt have already worked this out. But whatever you produce, when it's out there in the world, people will put it into their own context.
Yeah.
There's very little control you have over that. The more you try and control something and try and package it in a particular way, then you're either going to drive yourself down a dead end niche, or you're just going to get misrepresented. So I think it's better to just do whatever you want, put it out there, and if people like it, they will let you know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think as we've gone on with the band, we've played Art Tangent, which is kind of the post metal, post rock sort of festival.
It was very math at the time, wasn't it?
It was really math rock and post rock at the time, wasn't it? And it was it's gone more sort of post metal now. I think for the better, actually. I think the lineups Art Tangent are better now than they were, because it was getting to be like 30 identical bands, and now it's become a little bit more. It's gone more metal, but it's really good. It's the good metal. It's more your Conjurer rather than the stuff that I'm not into. But I'm not going to slag anyone because it's too easy, isn't it? So I like Conjurer. I like bands like that. So there's some interest. The metal scene's pretty interesting to me, and Conjurer and Death Heaven are the stuff I'm into metal wise, rather than other types of metal which are available on the internet. That's very diplomatic, wasn't it?
Exactly. It was, but we played Art Tangent.
We did Art Tangent. We've done gigs at Hawkwind. We played Stone Rock festivals. We've played. We've done so much stuff, and we've done like the traditional prog festivals. But wherever we've gone, we've never really fitted in, to be honest.
No.
And one of the problems we've got is each album we've done is different as well. So if you compare what we did on the first record to what we're doing now, is probably quite different, and it will be different again when we go into the next one. Yeah. And I think what I've learned now is what we're going to focus on is just building our own little world. So we'll continue to put stuff on YouTube. We'll think about putting things on outside the people who we interact with on Facebook, and we'll just worry about that. Yeah. And then we'll worry about
having it keeps us busy, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's just I think do it because do things because you love them and you're excited about them.
Yeah.
And don't really worry about what anyone else can do, because we used to think, people call us a post rock band, people call us a metal prog band, people call us and at the end of the day, people will call you whatever they choose to call you. It's not up to you. And if just to be honest, if anyone listens to what you're doing, you've won the lottery. So just be happy with what you got, to be honest.
Although to be clear, with the next album, we're really going for the pirate metal audience.
Pirate synthwave. The next one is
pirate synthwave. That's where the money's at.
It's for we know that Duran video where they're on the is it the Rio video?
That's
but
it.
More trad pirate. So it's sort of a new romantic pirate map.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more like galleons.
It's going to be a yo ho ho and all etc. So I think that's everything covered. Is there anything else you want to add?
We're just moving forward. I mean, me and Matt are always coming. Exactly. Me and Matt are always having ridiculous ideas, but going forward, we're hoping to be able to get to, we on our travels, we've bumped into quite a few interesting people, not just musicians, artists, actors, some other people as well. So we're hoping over the course of the coming months that we'll be able to get some of them to come and have a chat with us and do something like this with us. So I mean, that's one of the reasons. Whilst the podcast, the recording, whatever you want to call this, we're going to call it Let's Start a Cult. And it is basically because, we've got a lot of friends out there who you could describe as having, cult followings, and yeah, exactly. You just be careful. Not literally cult followings.
There's people, I mean, but it's definitely, it's something, because if we're not rehearsing and we're just sort of recording at home and, we don't know how things are going to pan out, and if we can just keep doing stuff to keep ourselves entertained, hopefully that's possibly of interest to other people, but mainly of interest to ourselves. We can just keep putting things on the internet that are fun. That's fine with me. And putting things on the internet that's fun is probably how this started, and hopefully this is how it will continue to evolve. So we'll just keep. So are we done, Kevin?
I think we're done, mate. So goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much. If you made it this far, well done.
Okay, if you made it this far, the code word is Torquay. Put it in the comments. The code word is Torquay. Okay, put it in the comments on YouTube.
Well
Torquay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good luck, everybody. Take care.
Yes. Stay safe out there. All right. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.